Hi, I'm back, and we have gotten through with chapter 5. Hopefully you've done your survey and you've been able to get an estimation of what type of relationship attachment style that you have. And no matter how intense the findings may be for you, please trust me and know that there's definitely a way to get to a secure attachment style, which is the healthiest. I hope you're having a beautiful day and hope you're ready to get into chapter 6. So chapter 6 says, meeting God one-on-one. I went to a psychologist friend and said if 500 people claimed to see Jesus after he died, it was just a hallucination. He said hallucinations are an individual event. So if 500 people have the same hallucination, that's a bigger miracle than the resurrection. That's from Lee Strobel. And I would recommend that you find some books from author Lee Strobel. He's really good at writing and talking about some of this stuff. Okay, love him or hate him. There's no denying the singer Johnny Cash lived with passion. Though his journey was packed full of arrest, affairs, and addiction, he battled through it all to become one of America's most legendary singers of all time. In the award-winning movie about him, Walk the Line, there's a gripping scene that brings to light what it means to live and sing from the heart, with meaning, purpose, and passion. Having scored an audition with record producer Sam Phillips, Johnny Cash and his band chose to sing a gospel tune originally sung by Jimmy Davis, a song describing the moment that Jesus saved his soul and forgave him. No more than a few verses into the song, Phillips stopped Cash and asked if he had something else to sing. Well, Cash was offended. He asked Phillips, "Is it the song or the way I sang it?" And Phillips said, "Both." Cash, notably irritated all the more, piped back, "What's wrong with the way I sing it?" And Phillips replied, "I don't believe you." Though Johnny Cash sang a song of belief in God, that he had peace within, and that God had saved him, Phillips called him out, saying that what he sang and what he felt were diametrically opposed. He sang with his mouth, but not his heart. Do those around you believe you have what's real? Have you ever been in church singing a hymn or praise song and we're just merely going through the motions? We have. Perhaps that's why the story resonates so much with us. Who, not what, you know. Her noticeably frazzled look and despondent demeanor had me, Tim, questioning every ounce of confidence I gained in graduate school. With hopelessness staring me directly in the eyes, my mind began filtering through every counseling theory I could remember. Rogers, unconditional positive regard; Erickson, intimacy versus isolation; Ellis, adversity, beliefs, consequences. I tried to convince myself that this, one of my very first clients, could be helped if I just used the right formula. Surely I can figure this woman out, I thought. Then out of nowhere, with disheveled hair and full of energy, my client stood up, walked directly around my desk, inches from my face, and in a raspy, almost demonic voice said to me, "Say Jesus." After a brief silence, I said what any confused counselor would. "What?" She got noticeably louder. "I said, say Jesus." Jesus? I said. Young and fresh out of graduate school, having memorized every counseling theory known to a man, I thought I had everything I needed to be a good counselor. But this client put me in my place, quick. Unbeknownst to her, she reminded me in that moment that what was really important, at least to her anyway, was God. She didn't necessarily care what or how much I knew. She really cared about who I knew. She wanted to know that I believed in the transformative power of Jesus Christ to change her. Albert Camus quoted, "I would rather live my life as if there is a God and die to find out there isn't than live my life as if there isn't and die to find out there is." The real thing. So we were created by God and for God. At the core, our hearts long for a real relationship with Him, and we can smell a fraud a mile away, even if that fraud is wearing our own skin. People will try almost anything to connect with God. Some try ancient Indian techniques of hunkering down in sweat lodges for days at a time to have a mystical experience. Others use yoga, meditation, and other Eastern methods of spirituality. In the Christian realm, The Protestant Reformation broke down walls in churches that separated the haves, which were the priests, from the have-nots, which was everyone else. Later, denominations created unique forms of worship to point to God's unapproachable holiness or celebrate his nearness. So some still use pipe organs, but many today have bands that sound as good as professional groups. Grand cathedrals in our major cities stand as monuments to the glory of God, and in the hills of Appalachia, some people pass rattlesnakes to each other in obedience to, as they see it, God's command. Some pastors yell, others whisper. Some church services last for several hours, but worshipers in most churches are checking their watches if the pastor preaches 5 minutes too long. So 20 to 30 years ago, we experienced a movement away from traditional worship styles. But the last 5 years or so have seen a resurgence, especially among young people, of the use of candles, quiet reflection, and soft music. There is a style of worship for almost any taste, and everyone promises the same thing: an authentic connection with the God of the universe. Well, does an authentic relationship with God really make a difference? Before we get too far into this chapter and introduce God as an attachment figure, many of you may be wondering whether or not an authentic connection with God makes a difference anyway. Besides, many psychological theorists throughout the past century, including Sigmund Freud, have used words like regression and dependence to negatively characterize a believer's relationship with God. And though we certainly understand how spirituality and religion can be harmful and unhealthy when they are abused or otherwise wrongly practiced, research has consistently shown the positive effect of religion and religious coping when applied in a healthful way. Dr. Harold Koenig, founder and former director of Duke University Center for the Study of Religion, Spirituality, and Health, and founding co-director of the current Center for Spirituality, Theology, and Health at Duke University Medical Center, and his colleague, Dr. David Larson, the former president of the National Institute for Healthcare Research, that's a mouthful, found that spirituality and religion have very positive effects on our mental health. So here we see a mind, body, and spirit connection. So take a look at some of the findings of their life's work. 1, spirituality helps to safeguard against the effects of stress and depression. 2, religion is associated with the prevention of mental illness and substance abuse. 3, religious involvement is more strongly related to mental health outcomes than to physical illness and mortality. That is, being involved at church in religious practices or with the spiritual disciplines have shown to have more positive effects on mental health even than on physical health and death rates. 4, personal involvement in spiritual practices in a religious community is related to a lower likelihood of anxiety disorders, depression, and alcohol and drug abuse and dependency. According to the research, being involved in a public religious community is most strongly predictive of better health. And 5, religious involvement in a faith community is also linked to a faster and more likely recovery from mental illnesses and substance and process abuse and dependency. The findings on substance abuse can come primarily from studies on the efficacy of 12-step groups like Alcoholics Anonymous. Now think about these findings for a moment. In light of your attachment style and how you view yourself and others, think about whom you would run to when you're stressed or otherwise living under a lot of pressure. At the end of a long, hard work day, maybe after you hear bad news, when you're overwhelmed with life and everything going on around you, and write the name of that person down. Now look at that name for a moment and picture a time when you were stressed and that person came through and was there for you. What feelings do you have when you think of that person? Especially the assurance of knowing the person will be there for you no matter what happens in life, that he or she has your back. Perhaps you feel safe, comforted, secure, confident. According to attachment theory, when we feel safe and secure, our stress and anxiety levels decrease and our desire for exploration increases. With the overwhelming research pointing to the positive effects of religion on mental health, an authentic relationship with God may be just what the doctor ordered. But what about those of us who can't really think of a safe person we could turn to? Perhaps when we were growing up, the source of our comfort was also the source of our pain. Therefore, we have never experienced what safety in a relationship is really like. Or we were extremely hurt or otherwise harmed by a church leader or religious fanatic. Now we're more hesitant than ever to even think about turning or trusting our God. We hear is safe, a God we hear is safe, yet we can't see, feel, or touch. It makes sense. Though Koenig and Larson in their research have found no evidence that religion can harm health, there is evidence that unhealthy forms of spirituality and religion, such as the religiously motivated medical neglect that we mentioned earlier in the book, are harmful, leading ultimately to death. Dr. Kenneth Pargament, in his pioneering research on religious coping styles, has found that positive religious coping styles, such as viewing God as a benevolent, caring God and seeking social support, are linked to better health. And on the other hand, negative religious coping styles, like interpersonal or shared dissatisfaction with religion and viewing God as a punisher, is actually a predictor for poor health. So what does this ultimately mean to you? Well, Koenig, Larson, and their colleagues sum it up. We believe that the state of the evidence probably reflects reality. That is, there are undoubtedly specific subgroups in the population who have been harmed by religious involvement, which has led to either direct or indirect negative health effects. Identification of those subgroups is an important area for future research, but nonetheless, the dominant pattern is one in which religious involvement either has no effect or has positive effects on health. Now, why is it that most of the 1,200 studies reviewed by Koenig and Larson show that religion has a beneficial and invigorating effect on health? Perhaps it's because God really does function as a safe haven and secure base in our lives, someone we can turn to in times of need and stress. God as an attachment figure. Connecting with God is about experiencing Him as a safe haven and secure base in both good times and bad. And the level at which you're able to connect with Him may be based on the way you turn to Him as an attachment figure in your life. In the last few chapters, we showed the components of the attachment behavioral system and explained the 4 styles of relating, particularly and beginning with our primary caregivers. But can God actually function as an attachment figure in our lives as well? And if so, how can we lean on Him to experience the safety we need for an intimate relationship? That's what attachment researchers have been looking at since the early 1990s, and it has been a focus of our own study for the past several years. In order for God to function as an attachment figure, He must serve each function that characterizes an attachment relationship. Our ability to seek proximity to God, turn to Him as a safe haven, experience Him as a secure base so we are free to explore and grieve over perceived loss or brokenness in our relationship with God can be the difference between cognitively believing in God, as many of us do, and emotionally connecting, giving Him our heart, trusting and walking with Him every day. Proximity seeking and God as a safe haven. Research supporting the claim that people seek God as a safe haven during times of stress is the most studied area of attachment theory in the context of religion. Lee Kirkpatrick, one of the pioneering researchers in the area of God attachment, suggests that in times of distress, persons of faith seek proximity to God in ways similar to that of an infant who seeks closeness to his parent. John Bowlby, who originally developed attachment theory, suggested that whether a child or adult is in a state of security, anxiety, or distress is determined in large part by the accessibility and responsiveness of his principal attachment figure. We mentioned earlier that the imagery and language used in regard to Christianity is extremely representative of attachment relationships. So coping with stress and troubling times in life is much easier when Christians speak of Jesus being by one's side, holding one's hand, or holding one in His arms. Well, Bible verses like the ones that I'm about to read are what Christians cling to often when they seek God as a safe haven. So let these verses just kind of flow over you. Psalms 23:4 says, "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you, God, are with me." 1 Peter 5:7 says, "Cast all your anxiety on Him because he cares for you. Hebrews 13:5. Never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. Psalms 46:1. God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. And Psalms 34:18. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and save those who are crushed in spirit. Other research supports the safe haven function God plays in the life of a believer. For instance, it has been found that in times of emotional distress, people turn to prayer even more than to the church. Grieving persons tend to increase their faith and religious devotion during times of loss, even though their fundamental beliefs do not change. And soldiers actually pray more frequently in combat. In times of death and divorce, fears associated with serious illness, emotional crisis, or relationship problems, and other negative events have also been found as stressful activators that send one to seek God as a safe haven. These findings show how our relationship with God is similar to our other attachment relationships, and that our idea of God can ultimately determine how safe God is in our life. God as a secure base. With a convincing theory and evidence showing God as a safe haven and emotional comfort, a core aspect of understanding God as an attachment figure is how he functions as a secure base. Incredible research has shown that those who believe they have a relationship with a stronger, wiser, non-physical deity report higher levels of global happiness. When individuals still feel secure, they experience positive emotions such as joy, gratitude, and contentment. Such feelings allow people to explore the world around them. They become more creative, engage in increased times of recreation, and are more likely to serve others or repay kindness. Secure attachment to God provides contentment in the here and now and assurance in future challenges. Feelings of loss or perceived abandonment by God. Finally, feelings of loss or perceived abandonment by God often elicit feelings of grief and anxiety in the person of faith. And this is difficult to determine, however, because in many cases, separation from God is by choice. Either the person stops believing God exists, or they have no conviction about sin in their lives and are therefore indifferent to whether God is really there or not. Doubts about whether God exists in reality can produce anxiety, especially among people who come from a religious upbringing. In fact, one study showed that college students who are going through the life transition of moving away from home experience higher levels of stress, more daily hassles, increased rates of depression, and more doubt about God. There are other reported instances where a person of faith felt abandoned by God, and the feelings were most often overwhelming, especially if the perceived abandonment came at a time of particular need. I'm going to go ahead and stop there. And my hope is that as I'm sharing this information with you, that the research and the data is backing up. We like to call it empirical data, like something that's proven and shown. And for some of us, and I'm one of those, I'm pretty analytical. And so it's hard sometimes to be able to just maybe let go and trust and have faith, especially in something that does not always seem tangible. I know that was my struggle. And so for me, it's been very helpful to have that information and to have that research. And there's also this element of faith where you just have to kind of step off and trust and hope. And but it's not a blind faith. It's a faith that is backed up. So hopefully, as you're hearing, you're listening to the research and the theories and the explanations, it gives you something to hold on to, maybe as an anchor, and something to kind of bite into and give you a chance to process. I know for me, eventually, God just, really became extremely tangible. I know that when I look in the eyes of another person, when I get a hug or give a hug, when I look outside and I feel the breeze on my skin, or I look out and look at the trees, the leaves blowing, those are things that just really represent to me God. And there's many other ways that God has become tangible for me. So, but that was something that had to develop over time, because I didn't really have the eyes to see him. I didn't have the ears to hear him. I didn't really have a heart to know him. And so that was something that had to develop in me. So I hope again that you will share this information. If you can, go ahead and subscribe. And if you actually click the button or the little bell, you'll get notifications when I post the next reading. I hope you have a great day, and then just join me back for the rest of chapter 6. Bye.